Number 12, the Honourable Shane Jones.
Speaker, the Minister of Transport. By how many percentage
Point of order.
points?
I apologise, Member. Point of order, the Honourable Tribunal.
Mr Speaker, in order to manage public perception comes from the cover letter from the department concerned. It's not something that Moana Mackie was making up. It was a quote from the cover document.
I apologise.
She targeted the
order. The member's made his point well. I apologise to the honourable member, but leave was granted for the document to be tabled. Question number 12, the Honourable Shane Jones.
Speaker, to the Minister of Transport. By how many percentage points has public transport patronage in Auckland increased over the past 3 years, and how does this compare to the percentage increase in state highway volumes over the same period?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Good news, Mr Speaker. The government has made excellent progress, and public transport trips have increased 20% in Auckland over the last 3 years, mostly due to an 18% increase in bus patronage. That means that about 6% of all journeys to work in Auckland now use public transport. This compares to state highway volumes that increased just under 1% in the last 3 years. However, they still, of course, make up around 90% of all journeys to work. Finally, Mr Speaker, could I congratulate the member for asking his second oral question since he took over the transport portfolio only 6 months ago. Sorry.
Very good. Sorry, supplementary question, the Honourable Shane Jones. Order. I want to hear the Honourable Shane Jones' supplementary question.
Mr Speaker, good to see the Minister knows how to count to 2 rather than 1, which always looks like I. Why does the draft 2012 government policy statement...
Order. Now look, the House will come to order. The Minister can see what happens when standing orders are not complied with. The standing orders are written for good reason, because if they're complied with, they keep order in this House. The Minister should not have added the last part to his answer. I realise it was done in reasonably good humour, but then so was the member's start to his question in reasonably good humour. But let's call it again 1-1 at this stage, but not continue the match. Supplementary question, the Honourable
Supplementary,
Shane Jones.
Mr Speaker. Why does the draft 2012 government policy statement propose to slash funding for public transport infrastructure from $100 million in the 2010 financial year to a range between $20 and $60 million for the next 3 years? Given the significant increase in public transport patronage in Auckland, why is he gutting the funding?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, the member is incorrect, and it actually points out in the government policy statement the reason that has changed has occurred is because we've shifted most of the public transport infrastructure funding outside the government policy statement, and with the help of my cabinet colleagues investing more in it, by investing more directly in the rail system. And in fact, in Auckland, as the member may or may not be aware, we're currently investing around $1.6 billion in improving the Auckland commuter rail infrastructure without using a regional fuel tax. And we're also investing several $100 million in the Wellington commuter rail infrastructure, none of which is included in the National Land Transport Fund. And it's actually the biggest investment in public transport in this country since the Hungarian trains were bought by the Right Honourable Sir Robert Muldoon back in the late 70s.
Supplementary to the Minister. Does he acknowledge the significant distance between him and the Auckland Council's transport priorities through his moves to reduce the funding assistance rates for rail operators, disregarding the regional land transport strategy through his LTMA reforms, and continuing to prefer the Puhoi-to-Wellsford-Holloway Highway over the Council's #1 priority, the City Rail Link?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, I'm a great believer in testing every project to ensure that they provide the best value to money, and the member needs to be aware that measured on the same basis currently between the Puhoi-to-Wellsford Road and the Auckland Central City Rail Loop, the Puhoi-to-Wellsford Road is a BCR in excess of 1, and the Central City Rail Loop is between 0.3 and 0.4, which is, of course, significantly less than 1 the last time I looked. And yes, we do need to make significant investment in public transport in our biggest city, and we are doing so. We're just being very careful to make sure that all the investments are actually worthwhile.
David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, is he aware that the Ministry of Transport's review of the City Rail Link and BCR relies on 200 to 300 buses per hour through the streets of Auckland's CBD, a premise that the Auckland Council deems nonsensical? And if so, does he agree with the Council or his ministry?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, I think the difficulty that we're in with the CBD rail loop is that quite obviously the Council has gone to that solution without looking at all the other options that are possible to improve public transport access in Auckland. And could I point out to the member that all the independent analyses by the Ministry of Transport and Treasury on the CBD rail loop says it will do very little to improve congestion. Now, I'm prepared to say that it's possible that CBD Rail Link is the next project in Auckland, but rather than bolting towards it without any consideration of the cost like the Labor Party, I think we have to ask some tough questions.
David Shearer.
Given the Minister's answer in written question 1515 that the calculation of the wider economic benefits on the holiday highway is not consistent with NZTA's own economic evaluation manual, has he asked for the business case to be re-evaluated? And if not, why not?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, what I can confirm for the member is that the two projects, the CBD rail loop and the Puhoi-to-Wellsford, have been measured on using the same ruler and have been found to be very, very significant. Well, it happens to be true, so just it's difficult, I know, sometimes to face the truth when you're in the Labor Party, but it is actually true that it's over 1 versus 0.3 to 0.4.
Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, did you hear what he just said?
I heard what he just said, but I also heard interjections that provoked him from the Labor Party. If members don't want other members who have the member may resume his seat, don't want other members who have the floor to comment, they shouldn't make the loud interjections. And because I think the interjection related to something about the truth and order. Now, order. We're not going to take that matter further. If members don't want ministers to pick up on interjections, don't interject. And that brings to a close questions for oral answer. Would some honourable member care to